You've probably heard the phrase God is love 1,000 times, right? It sounds so simple, so comforting. But what if I told you that inside that simple idea hides one of the biggest, most mind-bending puzzles in the history of philosophy? Well, today, we're going to grab that thread and give it a good pull. Let's see just how deep this rabbit hole goes.
So here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the basics. What do we even mean by all-loving? Then we're driving straight into the tough stuff. The clash between a perfect God and a personal one, the massive dilemma about where morality comes from, and the seriously weird puzzle of a God who lives outside of time. And don't worry, we'll end by looking at some really cool ways people have tried to solve this whole thing. All right, first things first. Before we can get into the puzzles, we've got to be on the same page. What are we actually talking about when we say that God is all-loving or perfectly good? The fancy philosophical term for this is omnibenevolence. Omnibenevolence. It's the core belief that God is perfectly, completely, 100% good and all-loving. And this isn't some optional extra, For classical theism, this is a fundamental, absolutely essential part of what God is. And look, this isn't just some abstract idea from a philosophy textbook. It's woven deep into religious texts. A verse like this, for example, doesn't just say God is love in a passive way. It paints a picture of that love as an active, powerful, world-changing force. And right there, yeah, that's where our first puzzle starts to take shape. So here it is, the first big hurdle. We've got this deep, deep tension between the idea of a God who is absolutely perfect and unchanging and a God who loves us in a personal, real, responsive way. How does that work? Okay, so on the one hand, you've got this idea of the immutable God, which comes a lot from Greek philosophy, like Plato's form of the good. The idea here is that to be perfect means you can't change. You're complete, static. But then, on the other hand, you open up religious texts and you find a loving God, a God who listens to prayers, who responds to people, who seems to get involved. So, which is it? How can you be a perfect, static, unchanging being and also have a dynamic, responsive relationship with someone? They seem to be polar opposites. This note just nails it, doesn't it? Love is incompatible with immutability. I mean, think about it. Real love, the kind we experience, is responsive. It's a give and take. It changes you. So, is it even possible for an unchanging being to truly love? This isn't some New Age debate. This is a conflict that theologians have been wrestling with for centuries. Now, this whole puzzle over God's nature, well, it spills over into another classic problem, a problem that forces us to ask, where does good even come from in the first place? This question, wow, this is the Euthyphro dilemma. It was first asked by Plato over 2,000 years ago, and it is still an absolute showstopper. Seriously, just take a second and think about it. Is an action good simply because God says do it, or does God say do it because the action itself is already good? See, here's the trap. Each path leads somewhere really uncomfortable. If you go with the first option, that something is good just because God commands it, well then morality is totally arbitrary. God could command us to be cruel, and by definition that would become good. Yikes. But if you take this second path, that God commands things because they're already good, then suddenly God isn't the ultimate source of morality anymore. There's some standard of goodness that exists outside of God, that even God has to follow. Neither option feels right. And believe me, this isn't just a theoretical brain teaser. The biblical story of Abraham being commanded to sacrifice his own son, Isaac, it's this exact dilemma in the most gut-wrenching way possible. Abraham is trapped between what God commands and what every fiber of his being tells him is moral. It raises this terrifying question that the philosopher Kierkegaard obsesses over. Does faith sometimes mean taking a leap that seems to go beyond or even against our human understanding of good? Okay, deep breath. Because if the puzzles about change and morality weren't enough to make your head spin, let's talk about the nature of reality itself. Let's talk about time. So the classical view of God isn't just that God has been around forever, it's that God is timeless, existing completely outside the flow of past, present, and future. But if that's true, then how can God do anything in our world? I mean, the very idea of an action, a cause, or an effect seems to need time to happen in. The philosopher Peter Vardy just cuts right through the noise with this quote. He says that talking about a timeless action is a straight-up logical contradiction. It's like talking about a married bachelor or a square circle. The words just don't work together. That's nonsense. This leads to a fascinating idea. What if the problem isn't with God, but with
are words. Our entire language is built for a world that operates in time. Words like act, cause, before, after, they're all time-based. So what happens when we try to use this toolbox to describe a timeless being? Well, thinkers like Thomas Aquinas argued that our language basically breaks. We can't speak literally about God. The best we can do is speak in analogies, in metaphors. Okay, so we've laid out some seriously tough puzzles. It might feel like we've hit a dead end, but philosophers and theologians are a creative bunch. Let's check out a couple of really powerful ways they've tried to rethink this whole thing to make it work. One of the most powerful solutions is to make a tiny but crucial distinction. What if God isn't timeless, but is instead everlasting? An everlasting God isn't outside of time, but exists within it, just without a beginning or an end. And just like that, poof, a lot of our earlier problems just melt away. A God who experiences time alongside us can genuinely act, respond, and have a real relationship without all those tricky logical contradictions. But there's another approach, one that is just profound and beautiful. What if God's primary way of acting in the world isn't some kind of direct, supernatural intervention? What if God acts through people? This quote from St. Teresa of Avila completely reframes the entire conversation. It suggests that God's love isn't something we just wait for, it's something we are meant to become. And that really leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. Maybe all of these puzzles about change, morality, and time, maybe they aren't just logical contradictions we're supposed to solve on a chalkboard. Maybe they're an invitation to stop looking to the sky for a divine actor and to start realizing that we are called to be the hands, the feet, and the compassion of an all-loving God right here, right now, in a world that desperately needs it. What do you think?